Hey everybody, this is Way Through News meteorologist Brian Good, the latest edition of Storm Talk. I'll get you through this setup that we'll be tracking the next couple of days, and then we'll talk about the holiday weekend, some of the latest data in regards to that. First off, the outlook today for severe weather, not anywhere close to us, way to our west, and across the Plains states where it's active. Tomorrow, same story. The Plains once again getting hammered. Good for the Western Kentucky University Storm Chase team that's out there now. Ryan Hoke, by the way, from our team is heading out there, but not until later on in about 8 or so days. So hopefully it'll be active for him to get some good data and science, but we don't want any damage to hit anybody, that's for sure, in that area. But it is active this week in that region for all intents and purposes. Now, as we head into Thursday, notice we don't have an outlook for thunderstorms here. I'm not entirely sure that I am in agreement on this. I don't like to disagree a lot with what comes out. But I do have some concerns here for Thursday, and I'll get to that here in just a second. Let's first cover how the atmosphere is looking today. We've got some thunderstorms now across Missouri. These are not really severe, but they can produce maybe an isolated warning as it becomes more of an MCS complex moving into the Boot Heel of Missouri itself. But notice this little band of showers breaking out in advance of that, what we call that little weak isotropic lift that's taking place in western Kentucky. Well, we're already seeing some of those high-level clouds, mid to high level, moving in now. We may see a few showers from that later on for this evening. Here is the Triple R model, the HER model. Don't pay attention to the numbers, by the way. It's way too warm on temperatures. It has tendency to be always exaggerated on numbers at times. So don't pay attention to that. But watch the radar trends. A few little specks. This afternoon and evening, a few more little specks, brief little showers. Can't rule it out. Mainly west, though, of 65. That's the general thing I want to get from this map, is that it's mainly west that has the best chance of seeing the type of moisture field to produce these showers, because it's still relatively dry. Yes, dew points are up as of last check, so the slightly more humid atmosphere, but still not enough to really raise eyebrows when it comes to rain at this point. But we're getting there, slowly but surely. Now, overnight tonight, can't rule out an isolated shower around the region. Notice that the HER model is trying to keep everything messy on the radar through tomorrow morning, and that's because some of these boundaries that get left behind, we'll have to watch out for tomorrow, because once the sun comes up and it heats up any one of these little boundaries that could be snaked across the area, that'll be the focal point for thunderstorms for tomorrow. And they probably won't move very much at all, so heavy rain will be the main issue there. Maybe some gusty winds, but heavy rain will be a concern for those that can develop along those boundaries. So we don't know where those boundaries are going to be yet. That's why we're going to keep the rain chance at a chance for Wednesday, and we'll just have to wait and see how the radar develops this evening on the trends, and then we'll have a better idea where the boundaries will likely be that will be dormant overnight that could waken up tomorrow. All right, and here's the setup. Here's the RPM model, and this really explains the general concern or the challenges that we have when it comes to the next few days on thunderstorm chances. First off, as we get into Wednesday, I mentioned our few pop-ups that could fire here across any boundaries that are in the area that are dormant. That chance will be there. But we'll also be watching the idea, and this has been on the maps now for over a week, of an MCS developing around St. Louis that'll work its way into the Wabash by supper time for tomorrow, and then eventually fade as it loses a lot of its punch, basically, runs out of gas, if you will, as it approaches I-65. Still be some gusty winds with that Wednesday night. We'll watch that carefully. I think the best chance still looks to be closer to Evansville for that damaging wind threat. But what happens when you get MCSs like this? There usually is a little vortex that'll spin. They have a little bit of a cold front, and they have a warm front feature to it. So it looks like a mini storm system. Usually we see these on the satellite image that cover at least the entire eastern half of the country, that entire setup. But MCSs are small versions of that. They only cover just a corner of a state in some cases. But this is how they develop. Now, when they pass through, and especially if the cold front portion can develop quite the arc to it, like this one is showing, it is pushing through water. So what happens is, say you're in the pool, and you take your hand in the pool and put it upright, and you push against the water in the swimming pool, the water on either side of it wraps around it, right? It pushes, you push outward, water wraps in behind it. And that's what the wind fields do when it comes to an MCS. So when the MCS dives in, on the southern end and the northern end, there's a bit of a pushback or a tail boundary that will develop on both ends, and we've got to watch that. Yes, you've got to watch the leading edge bow for damage and winds, but eventually that will fade out, and then wherever that stops will be the dormant boundary that could waken up again for the next day. But you also got to watch the tails on the ends of it as well. And for this particular one on this model, there is a tail. It's not showing up there, but it is in that area. But watch what happens as we get into Thursday morning, the wee hours of the morning. That tail becomes alive and begins to connect with another system that will be developing throughout the morning hours on Thursday into the midday, and that will continue into the afternoon. Now, RPM's fast on this idea. This is looking at a nocturnal event that will move through here Thursday morning. That's a possibility. The NAM model is not really key on the nocturnal idea, and is more on the idea that something would develop from a boundary across Chicago. I mentioned this yesterday. It's still aiming on the idea that something around Chicago would that's dormant would come more active in the afternoon hours on Thursday and then race our way. And that is concerning because we are looking to be very unstable on Thursday. So we still have two scenarios that could play out for later tomorrow night into Thursday, and we're trying to weigh out our options of which one is most likely to happen. And it's because there's a lot of moving parts. You know, you got a lot of boundaries moving around. The models have a tough time picking out these little features. So if we didn't have these little features, these little boundaries, we wouldn't have to worry about a whole lot about thunderstorm activity. But we'll monitor that as we into Thursday, and then we'll get, looks quiet Thursday night, but then Friday we'll begin to see more activity mainly to our northwest. Overall, though, the key I want you to get from this is the main wind fields, the strongest wind fields, are to our northwest. All right, here's Louisville right here. So it's Indiana, Illinois, Missouri. This is where your organized severe weather, this is where the MCSs will start. This is where we will have the best chance for multiple warnings and for watches to be issued, mainly in that zone where the stronger wind belt is. For our area, the wind fields are weak. So unless we get some type of a boundary that can move through and create some forcing to get thunderstorms to develop, which can be a decaying MCS, a boundary from it, or just basically instability, thunderstorms to develop. That's about it. Otherwise, it is going to be humid and hazy and quite warm, with feeling like hot conditions over 90 with the heat index. So it's not a washout forecast by any stretch. But if you get one of these little complexes that can survive and move into our area, the damage and wind threat will be real because of the instability being so high and the potential for flooding, flash flooding, to take place in a short time. These are quick hitting systems. These are not slow all-day light rain events like we just came out of. All right. So having said that, here is the NAM sounding. Again, this is the ground level. You're looking straight up. Green is moisture, red is temperature line. When they're close together, you're moist. From the far apart, you're dry. Overall, it is a somewhat humid profile. There's some dry pockets of air for Wednesday. There is some instability. It's mainly elevated instability in the upper layers of the atmosphere. So, yes, there could be a few thunderstorms with gusty winds and heavy rain that could develop Wednesday. Again, that would depend if any boundaries from the activity later tonight is still around to be triggered tomorrow. Not a big deal for Wednesday. But then Thursday. Thursday, the sounding is not an overly moist profile, but there is a slight cap that's there. Not much. I mean, very slight. Instability, though, this is what we call fat cape. There's skinny cape and fat cape, and what you look at is the temperature line, and then the yellow line is your cape, and when there's a gap between the two of them, the bigger the gap, the fatter the cape is, and the closer they are, the skinnier. This is a relatively fat cape. All right, so instability here is tremendous. Lifted index around -11, so lots of energy for the atmosphere to take care of or take advantage of. But look at the wind fields in the atmosphere. Weak. Very little wind. So organized severe weather, again, is not likely. And unless there's a trigger in the area, nothing's going to happen. So we have to monitor these little decaying MCSs and these little boundaries, because if they send a boundary in our region and they take advantage of this type of instability, you see the problem. Large hail, damage winds will become more of an issue. And you can quickly go from a 20% chance for a thunderstorm kind of a day to a 90% in a matter of hours. So stay tuned to the forecast as we get a better handle on how, especially Thursday, is looking. When you look at the map version of this, you see the high capes, 4,000 or higher. Indiana, central and northern Kentucky, West Kentucky, much higher in the plains, by the way. But we got to watch this, because if any of these boundaries could sneak into here, we will have some problems to contend with. As far as the weekend goes, still watching to see how much of this tropical wave can develop through the Bahamas heading towards South Carolina over the holiday weekend, because the northwest side of that, you're going to have a lot of substance, a lot of sinking air. It's going to be hot and relatively dry. But if this low hovers just off the coast and stays offshore, we will still have some influence here from that wind belt being awful close to us and some boundaries moving through with showers and thunderstorms for the entire holiday weekend. If this low moves in a little further into South Carolina, then that would allow the ridge to build in even stronger and would be a very, very warm weekend. We'd have to raise our numbers up a few degrees and then lower the rain chance to just very isolated activity. This is the GFS look to it. Here's the Canadian. Similar to an extent, still offshore, but still has an influence of thunderstorms very close to us. And then as of last check, the Euro from last night, relatively similar idea. So the weekend's still a toss-up on how stormy it'll be, but the potential is there for it to be very warm if that tropical system plays out as expected. I'll see you on TV.